excited about today's conversation just because any piece of time I get to steal from this woman is, a piece of time well spent for me. Kristi Melani is not only the best boss I've personally ever had in my life, that I say unabashedly to anyone who will hear it, but she is just an incredible marketing leader. She is the CMO at Telesign and has a team that is swiftly growing, in part because she's just so great at leading teams. And there is a tiny, tiny puppy in the background, and it's really, really cute. So Kristi's brought her friend.
I have. So if you hear growling, it's not me, unless it depends on what we're talking about. But yes, it might be a little dog in the back.
Yeah, entertainment for us all. So,
perfect.
Kristi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. That was quite the intro. I'm going to have to carry you around to do my own PR. That was pretty fantastic.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do it anytime.
Love it.
So I want to give everybody a little bit of background as we get into the topics at hand. But background, personal connection between Kristi and I was her head of brand. I don't remember what my full title was, head of brand and integrated marketing, something like that. Back in 2021, 2022, and we rebranded the company together and set the ecosystem in place and that kind of thing. Before I moved on to a different role so that I could experience what being a VP was like at a different company. But it was an incredible year. And I learned so much from Kristi. And then she has since grown the team and grown the company far beyond what it was when I was there. Kristi, do you want to first say anything about your current role and then give us a little background about you?
Sure. So as I said before we even started this, yes, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Telesign and go-to-market strategy, but I've had the pleasure of scooping up some different departments along the way, and a lot of it because I really, really believe in this go-to-market village that has to come together and work together. So people like the market development team, the enablement side, I kind of look at it as we're the end-to-end of the top of the funnel, both from an awareness standpoint, from a demand gen standpoint. So it's been really exciting because I'm coming up on my 3rd anniversary, which I can't believe when you were going chronologically on time. It goes by very, very fast. But it's also been such a interesting ride because I keep getting to add things to my purview, which makes it that I'm just, quite frankly, never bored. I'm always on my feet, which is something that, as you know, because you know me, I am a type A personality in the biggest A possible. So by, keeping myself stimulated and challenged, it is so important. So working through a lot of exciting integrations, mergers, you name it, is really what gets me going. And I love to see my team just really striving as well. So exciting time ahead as we are embarking on really just expanding our global story and our global footprint.
Yeah. And if I could add anything to that, as someone who worked directly under you and led one of the spokes of your org, I've never seen a CMO carry themselves the way that you do. There's this mix of compassion and authenticity, and also it's mixed with no bullshit, right. Let's get this done. And that A-type personality is the best type A personality that I've seen because it's mixed with this healthy dose of empathy. Yeah, I don't know. How did you develop that? If you could go back in your career, how did you get to where you are today?
So, I sort of joke and say when I think about how many managers I have had in the 30 years that I have been working, it's so many. I almost stopped counting because it's really just, I've had a plethora of managers. And I learned the most from the managers that I did not want to emulate. And so I learned what it felt like to go through a divorce and report to somebody who did not care that I had a really rough moment, who
Wow.
did not really care that I was struggling with having a mommy house and a daddy house and having a toddler and all of a sudden kind of a single mom. So there were those moments where I realized when I'm in a position to be leading people, I'm not going to be like that. I can't, because I truly believe that you get the best work out of people when you understand what their life is like when they're not on, right? When they're not on the clock, if you will.
Yeah.
And we know these days, work-life balance, I don't believe in that. I don't think there is such a thing. So you have to be able to really lean into the days that people are working. You have to care about their whole self, not just the work product. So I would love to say that I mirrored myself against somebody that was just so amazing and lifted me up, but it was probably the opposite.
Mm.
And that's okay, right? That's okay too, because that we want to learn from all of the experiences that we have. But where I see that it's been working is that I have people who follow me and
Mhm.
who will unabashedly decide they're willing to leave their current role to come and work with me again.
Mhm.
So I take that as kind of the inadvertent compliment of, well, I must be doing something right, because if you want to keep coming and working on my team, that's a good sign. And what I love to see is so many of my managers now really manage kind of not this exact the same, because I don't want a cookie cutter of me, but they know what's important. And so they do the same thing with their team.
Yeah, it's incredible to watch. It's and also feel and experience. I had this review. Someone that used to be on my team at your company gave me a recommendation on LinkedIn like a few months ago, and he said, Nat, I still hold Nat as the beacon, like the best boss I've worked for. And I was thinking that's because of the environment that you created for me to lead my team within, and I don't know if enough C-suiters realize the power of that.
Right. Well, I mean, I really do think my job, yes, is to lead marketing strategy and to be, the voice at the big kids table for marketing. But I also think that my job is to create leaders and to create a team that feels empowered and is going to just do great things, because I don't need to take all the credit, right? It's not just me. If it was just me, it'd be a team of one. That'd be really boring. And it'd also be very overwhelming for everybody that had to interact with me. So I look at it as that's my job. I really do think I need to major in being a people manager and leader. And then I minor in the marketing side, because I'm creating a team that's just amazing at what they do, right? Hire people that are smarter than you in the respective areas.
Yeah, and
100%.
I can attest to your team. Like it's this hilarious thing. Like Kristi, if you were like, we're all going to move to Iceland and we're going to start this like commune, that I'd be like, okay, cool.
Right, let's do
Where's my ticket? You know
it.
what I mean? Because when you have that experience with a great leader, you are able to, or as a leader, you are able to pull talent that have worked for you in the past, and that's the most powerful thing.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And I look at the same thing where I had my previous manager at Telesign was absolutely amazing. He was amazing. He gave me the shot, that I needed. And he's something that, someone I'll always revere and someone I will always watch. I don't know that, I'm going to follow every single step of the way, because you also want to create your own path. But those are those moments where when you find somebody who does that for you, you don't forget it. You don't
Yeah,
forget it.
it makes such a difference. Did you always think that you were going to be in marketing when you were little, like when you were growing up and, through your younger positions?
Yeah, so when I was very little, so when I was in sixth grade, I was convinced that I was going to be a dental hygienist. And yeah, And I interviewed my dental hygienist at the time, and I said, "What's the worst part of your job?" And she said, and this was in what, 1978, right? Do the math. I'm dating myself. And she said, "Well, at least once a day, a child throws up on me, like, and I'm out." Okay, thank you. Good interview. I still did my presentation. I flossed somebody's teeth in the middle of, sixth grade. But then when I got into, believe it or not, junior high, we had a career day, and I was literally flipping through cards that had descriptions of job functions, right? Doctor, lawyer. And there was one that said public relations. And I read the bullet points, and here I am, 14 years old, and went, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I never changed my mind. I knew all the way through high school that I wanted to do something that was called public relations because I liked to talk. I liked to tell stories. I'd like to kind of make things up. And then I majored in public relations with a minor in Spanish because I live in San Jose. So I knew Spanish was going to be important. And I never looked back. I carried a bag for about a year. I was a seller for a year, which I think was also really important as a marketer to be empathetic to what a sales needs, because that's what marketing is here for. We serve sales and we serve kind of the company at a brand level. Not everybody has that kind of epiphany that early, right? But I'm so glad I stuck with it, because now it's 3 decades of watching this as an industry evolve, and it's, boy, never a dull moment. That's for sure.
And you worked for several big brands, big tech companies before Telesign. What did that journey, if you could give us like a high level overview?
Yeah, I actually started out on the agency side, which I always recommend for people, especially younger in their career. If you don't know exactly what facet of marketing that you want to lean into, that an agency is a great way to start. So I had a lot of clients. And one of my clients was Alta Vista, which, again, dating myself, but they were the Google of its time until Google came along.
Before even Googling it was a kind of a verb, there was another search engine called Alta Vista. And at its time, it was the world's most popular search engine.
So I ended up going into internal from the agency side, working at Alta Vista, went back to the agency side and had a client called Plantronics, which at the time they were looking for somebody to head up their digital marketing and e-commerce leg. Because I started to gravitate towards all things .com, digital, internet, you name it, I thought, you know what? This is a good time for me to start to expand my horizons from a marketing standpoint. And I worked at Plantronics for almost 19 years through an acquisition of Polycom, and then ultimately becoming VP of marketing in that the 2 decades that I spent there. And then thought, I don't know, do I want to retire from here? I think I needed some more experience in the SaaS world, since that's kind of the future of everything. Went to Anaplan, and then when I was at Anaplan, I was not planning on only being there for 9 months, but then that manager that I mentioned to you gave me a call and said, we need a CMO, and I want you to come. I want you to create a marketing department. And boy, I mean, I ran towards it, because that was on my vision board, was to be a CMO. I had done all of the functions now, and realized this is the chance. I got to jump on this. And what a day of reckoning that was, to say, I did it. And it's not, I don't cross it off my vision board, but boy, what a wonderful star and circle and smiley face it has next to it, because it was quite a journey to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy, because when I was working for you, I remember you told me that it was the first time that you were a CMO, and I was like, no way. Like, how are you just, I mean, but the decades of experience do speak for themselves, right? Like, you'd served in every role before getting there. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing too is sometimes I see like CMOs, or I'll meet them and they were doing something else, like they were head of product or something, and like shifted to marketing. And I just don't think anything compares to having all of those experiences in marketing before you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do agree. I mean, I'm, obviously I look at it from my lens and my journey, but I love being able to say when I meet with all the pockets of my org is that I think I can help you. I think I can help you because I have hands-on experience with almost every function that has been, that's underneath my org. And I think people appreciate that because I can ask questions that are coming from a place of, I did this once, is this still the same, right? I'm not going to assume that things haven't changed and I'm not as close to the nitty gritty. But I was in a meeting with one of my one-on-one with one of my direct reports, and she started explaining a lot of details to, and I said in the most kind way, I said, you know what? I get it. Like, you 100%, I'm in it with you. And she actually said, I'm so used to having to meet with people that don't understand what I do.
It's
so,
true.
Like,
it's
she
true.
almost apologized. Like, no, don't apologize, because unfortunately, I think it happens probably more times than not. But that is where I do like knowing that when it's a marketing type of conversation, and I'm maybe the C-level person with amongst other C-levels, I will say I am the smartest person on this topic.
Yeah.
And that's not to be snotty or, braggadocious, but I should be, I better be, because this is what I've been doing. I'm not the smartest person when it comes to an engineering track. I have an opinion on everything, but I know when I'm going to lean in with the experience behind me rather than a gut reaction. And gut reactions are good too. Don't get me wrong. But I think that tangible experience that is applicable, the teams appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I watched you do is navigate those relationships just expertly. And I don't know if that's from all of your previous experiences, if you took if you secretly have a doctorate in psychology. I don't know what it is.
Well, I can tell you what it is. That I'll tell you, it was a tipping point for me. That I had, my goodness, this feels like it was probably 20 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that. And I took a 360 review, and my team thought I was amazing. My manager thought I was amazing. My peer set, not so much. And that was a moment I went, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I not, paying attention and investing in those sideways relationships? Because if you don't have that historical currency with people that I need to lean on for support, I need to have them be advocates. I need to be able to have passionate conversations with them. That was such an eye opener. In fact, I was interviewed by Forbes magazine and talked about very, very vulnerable on those results. But it was something that I have told people so many times as a story, because you have to care. You have to care about those relationships and make the time, because then that's when you become, somebody else says, wow, Kristi is the best, executive partner I've had. Instead of me saying, I think I'm amazing, right? It's like we tell our kids, I love it when you tell me that you're awesome. But if a teacher or somebody else tells me you're awesome, so much better. Yeah. And I think that was a moment where I realized I have to pay attention to everything.
Well, and it could be hard as a marketing leader, right? Because in a lot of organizations, they see marketing as a cost center, right? Like,
correct.
Forming those great relationships with like your CFO, right? Or,
yes.
But it can be difficult because you have different agendas, and
correct.
you have to find that alignment there.
Yeah.
What would you say about that? Like, what's your secret sauce other than building really strong relationships with your peers? Like, what's your secret sauce in building alignment as a marketing leader?
I'm a performance-based marketer. So if somebody says to me, this campaign was great, my first question is, how do we know? What was our benchmark? What are our KPIs? Because marketers do get a wonderful reputation of being marketers for their own work, right? And sometimes we do that in a very lofty kind of, creative way of, I'll pull together a really cool sizzle reel and show you how pretty everything was. Pretty is great, but if pretty does not meet the expectations of the ideal customer profile of your personas, you will have somebody, often the CEO, often the CFO, that says, well, show me the money, right? And so when I first came to Telesign, we worked on a brand new model about attribution. It was not something that was in the vernacular of the go-to-market team. And so by creating an attribution model that it can actually say, this is what marketing has done, this is what we've brought to the business, and it's all metrics based, that's much harder to argue. And it's also that's fine if you want to, cut budget, but here is the pieces and parts of the business that will be impacted. Now, you know better than anybody that sometimes that's hard to prove when it comes to brand, right? I can prove that when it comes to demand gen, how many calls we're making from a market dev standpoint, but brand is something that sometimes you can't see my fingers, but I'm making this kind of, Spidey singly of it's not something you can touch, but it is if you figure out how to measure awareness and engagement and voice of the customer or share a voice in conversations that matter. That's all brand, but that's also the education part. And I don't mind being asked questions that we might think, oh my God, I can't believe I'm being asked this question. I have to explain this. Explain. Be the marketing 101 for everybody who's not in marketing, and approach it from that way, because once you pull them into the movie, then it's a little easier to go and kind of defend the things that might feel intangible versus the tangible side. And you also have to be open to feedback. I know we as marketers, boy, somebody forgot to tell us in the requirements that you have to have thick skin. Right? Because I mean, right, as a brand person, as a creative lead, it feels like you're telling me my baby's ugly if you don't like what I've designed. Like, what do you mean? This is beautiful. But getting to the point where you come up with options, you give people the opportunity to provide some input along the way. But then, at the end of the day, we are the experts, as I said, right? We're the smartest people in the room, but bring data, or else it really is just an opinion.
Yeah.
And opinions don't get us very far.
I think that two really key points that you just hinted at, obviously we're talking about metrics and things like that, but figuring out what that goal is, right? You can measure brand if you run a brand campaign, and then you look at the amount of sales calls booked over the next 3 to 6 months, because brand campaigns take a while to percolate.
Right.
And that's your goal. So here's our tangible goal, right? We're going to run it from here to here, and we're going to measure from here to here, and here's why. And then it becomes a different conversation, right? Rather than
the beauty of that is, yes, it gives you the benchmark. The shadow side to that is those are sometimes too expensive for certain companies to run. And so then you get into that situation of, well, I don't have a brand barometer. I don't have an NPS score. I don't have a place to start. And I remember when you and I worked together, okay, well, let's find some creative ways to at least get us some level of, we're starting here. I mean, and, again, people will argue, yeah, well, that could have also happened here or there. What I've done in the past is I've turned things off. If you don't think that XYZ program is contributing, you know what? Let's turn it off. let's just turn it off for 30 days. And I'll never forget, I had a CEO, this was years ago. I turned everything off. 2 weeks in, he called me into his office and he said, I don't know what you did, but turn on whatever you turned off.
I love that. That is so cool.
Like, great. Because sometimes you have to go for the shock value of, wow, that actually did impact something in a way that I was not expecting it to.
I love that. You are going to be my spirit animal next time I need to, like, only you would have the guts to be like, all right.
Well, I did have that. I had that moment of like, fingers crossed, like, oh God, this better work.
But it's true. It's, when companies like Nike, who spend a lot on brand marketing, and then obviously their sales are what they are and their brand is what it is. And you can't do that without spending and investing in it. But you can't necessarily, prove the value of it without knowing what the world looks like without it sometimes.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing that you hinted at there is context. So providing the context by which you're making the recommendations. So like, I remember when we did the Telesign brand together, we did a lot of stakeholder brainstorms and things like that, and pulled out a lot of like psychology work around who we wanted to be as a business and what impact we wanted to make on the world. And then when we're presenting it to C-suite, we're giving that context. Like, we made these decisions because of this. And I think maybe it was because you and Joe are so great. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, it resonated and everybody was really engaged. And perhaps it's in part due to that context that we provided.
I think so. I still hear people remembering the conversation that we had when we were pitching, the color palette, where when we actually talked about what color represents, right? The psychology of color, and how purple was something that was royal and trustworthy. And it kind of then explained how that aligned with our brand promise of being trustworthy. People still remember, like, I never knew that color meant anything. And so knowing that was that moment of, but you're explaining it so that then you don't have to like purple, because purple might be a very subjective answer, but then people need to tell you, I just don't like purple, because you don't want to say, I don't like purple because I don't want to be trustworthy. I don't want to look like royalty. Like, really? So that's, you still, I'll never again, somebody I worked with, this was close to 28 years ago. He pulled me into his office and he said, I really don't like the color on the website. Said, okay, it's blue. Yeah, I think it should be different than blue. I had to say, blue is our brand color, right? And here's why we picked it and why we did certain things. Marketing is such a subjective, really, art. It is. When people say, is it art or science? It's both, but boy, is it emotional. So if you don't like blue, you don't have to like it. You don't need to get a blue tattoo, but that's the brand color. So you have to, you got to commit. And then, but the explaining why behind it, to your point, is so important, because it's a lot harder to argue it then.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, they're like, oh, do you feel like you're more of an artist or you're more of a scientist? And I was like, I'm more of a therapist, to be honest with you. Because I like bring out the things that are just kind of hiding under the surface with leadership teams and companies and whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, here's who we really are. Yeah. And that can be quite confronting, right? And then every decision that we make on top of that is based on who you really are. And it's, it's a thing.
It is. And it is the uncovering that. I mean, I think that is a great way to look at it from a therapy standpoint, because that is the, a therapist doesn't actually tell you what to do. They just ask you a lot of questions and make sure that you're answering them in a way that is going to help with a future state, right? I remember going to a therapist going, yeah, but aren't you supposed to give me a list of things I'm supposed to do now? right?
Yeah.
Because no, it's leading that conversation. And by pulling out those things in an organization, then yes, then we can come with the right solution and recommendation. But you can't just run all the way to a decision. You do have to do some of that journey work.
Yeah. I meant to ask this question in the beginning, but since I forgot, how do you define the term brand for people?
It's so hard, right? It's so hard.
Yeah.
So I think it is, it ends up becoming, what do you want to be known for?
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at it from a personal brand, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to be known for? What do you, a little morbid, but what do you want it to say on your tombstone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you leave that legacy behind, that is a brand. That is the brand that you've imprinted in on people, places, things, solutions. So if you look at it from a business perspective, I think it's the same. It's what is the mark that you want to make? What do you want to be known for? And
Yeah.
you can tell when certain brands haven't really thought that through.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's kind of all over the place. So it feels like a bowl of spumoni, right? Like I don't know, what am I eating here? There's candied fruit, there's nuts, there's this weird tasting ice cream. Like what is this? As opposed to really leaning in to say, this is what we want to be known for, and the legacy that we want to leave behind with our customers, our prospects, our investors, press, you name it. And I approach that with life too. It is what is going to be your personal brand so that you leave a mark.
Yeah,
And
that's
you
so
know,
smart. That's such a great way of explaining it. You know what's funny? While you were talking, I was thinking, once you're known for something, you can sell almost anything.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's also I think that's what keeps brands that have survived for so long is they stick with it instead of, we experience creative fatigue ourselves, right? Because how long did we work on the brand before we even launched it, right? It felt like forever. It has the, gestation period of carrying a child, right? And then
It does.
we launch it and go, oh, now we need to change it. No, you don't. A brand that will stick around. I mean, Procter and Gamble, Nike, those are brands that they've evolved with time, because you have to still be timely and topical. But at the end of the day, they still stand for the same thing they did when they were created.
Yeah. This is okay. While you're talking, I'm thinking, I'm like visualizing what you're saying. And I had this visualization of, carrying a child is kind of like creating a brand. It's funny because I was just talking to someone else about how, you can create this beautiful brand, but it's really how you care for it afterwards and how you
Correct.
express it continually over and over and over. It's kind of like raising your kid. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
you did all this thing to create this beautiful baby. Well, we can't leave them in a Moses basket at the nunnery now. We have to actually raise the baby, to become a great person.
Correct. And you've picked the lane, right? You've picked a lane of, this is how I want to be as a parent. And
yeah.
How confusing would it be to a child if all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Tomorrow is no rules. Do whatever you want. It's like they look at you and go, what did you do with my mother? Right.
Yeah.
And maybe they're excited for a day, but the next day they want the structure back. They want that to be there. And I do think that, again, you look at some of these bigger brands. I love the Nike as the example, right? That Nike in Greek mythology is the goddess of victory.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything they do is about how their brand is going to help you win in life, in sports, in whatever. It's pretty rare that you're going to see them diverge from that to where they're going to focus on failure, right?
Yeah.
It's just not what they do. And so picking that lane in your life and in the company, and there are rebrand moments, but when we did our rebrand together, we didn't let go of all the legacy.
Mm-hmm.
You evolve it again to keep it topical and keep it on the track of where you want the brand to go, how you want the teenager to now grow up and to be an adult.
Do you have any advice for the CEOs and CMOs out there? How can you tell when it's time for a rebrand? Like what kind of sparks that?
I think, some of it is longevity, right? That there are times where you start to look at where the market is going. And this is so tactical, but when we looked and said, everybody's brand in our space or in the tech space is no longer all caps or heavy font or, big, lots of words, right? We're starting to get into this succinct world where digital, quite frankly, made it to where a lot of brands had to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's that, I think it's every 5 years, you should do a brand review and make sure that you are on track of where the market is going, but you don't have to abandon it just because. And we used to always kind of joke that, and now I can say this because I am a CMO, but it was, here comes another CMO. Guess what they're going to want to do? Redesign the website.
Yeah.
Change the logo, change this. I'm okay with that, but why? Right?
Yeah.
It should be based in, we are looking like we're laggards now in the market because we look old school and we want to be embraced by a new, a new buyer that is focused on things that we didn't even think about 18 years ago when the company was formed, right? As an example. So I think it's good to keep ourselves honest by looking every 3 to 5 years. But a major brand overhaul, I think, is when the market is pushing you out of the space you're in because you look antiquated or you're just not keeping up with the times.
Yeah. And rebrands can look so many different ways, right? Like it's sometimes people think rebrand, they're like, oh God, are we going to rename and brand new logo?
Exactly.
It's like it can be as little as like Coca-Cola updating their font slightly and then thinking about what they want to project to this new generation. Like it doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of your business.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And I do think that is when you say that to a rebrand word to people like a CEO or CFO, they automatically see dollar signs, right? Oh boy, this can be expensive. And changing the narrative to the evolution of the brand.
Yeah.
That is different. That is very different to where, when we started out on the brand, we were focusing on our customer's customer. Well, and an evolution of the brand is now we're focusing on the customer. That's not a huge pivot, right? We still are a B2B to C company, but in this moment in time, we're going to focus on the B part. And then we might come back to the C, but you're still telling the same story, just from a slightly different angle, if you will.
What do you, is there anything else that you learned during Telesign's rebrand or in the upkeep of the brand afterwards? Is there anything else that you hadn't experienced before or another takeaway from your most recent rebrand?
I think it was more of just, we did it right because a brand book, which, brand guidelines, people look at that and go, oh boy, it's 20 pages of here's the pretty pictures but you have to do that. And you have to invest the time and energy to develop a beautiful brand guideline because, especially with global companies, if you don't, you're going to start to see some interesting stuff happen to your brand. Yeah. Whether it's on purpose or whether by accident or just, oh shit, you didn't tell me I couldn't make it, fuchsia. right? Like, well, I didn't think I had to tell you what you couldn't do. And I remember having that conversation with you and your team was, I want a whole page on the things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like put a big old cross across it. And I do think that that has helped us be able to extend the brand, keep the integrity around it, but give people some opportunity of, I'm okay making the logo pink during, seasonal times where that makes sense. But here's why, here's where and when, and here's the approval process that you have to go through before you're just going to make it, metallic or something.
Yeah.
So I really do think, and that's about educating, and that's where people get excited, is that I can play with this, but I know how. Because in my previous lives, I've had to go to certain teams to say, you guys cannot do that with the logo.
It looks crazy.
It looks crazy. Are those horns coming out of it? Like, true stories, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, people, that means they're proud of the brand and they want to help extend it. And the other thing that we created was an employee ambassador program, which basically is teaching people how to be an extension of the brand in the form of your voice and form of engagement, right? Using social properties, whatnot. And gosh, they're so proud. They really are so proud. And that's what you want. And then that becomes kind of contagious for other people who are around it.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned from you that I implemented with the next company was that moment of brand reveal. Like, you encouraged us to make it the biggest moment that we possibly could.
Yeah.
Right. So what we had, a prize, I believe, with like posts for employees. Like, it was just this massive moment. And then the day that we revealed our brand, the entire LinkedIn lit up that indigo color that we chose.
It was, it was so amazing. Cool. It
was
right?
So cool.
And we're total brand nerds, right? Let's be honest. Like, I literally just got goosebumps remembering that day, right? Certain people probably go, oh boy. But those are those moments where another rebrand that I did that was probably one of the biggest was when Plantronics and Polycom merged. And we unveiled the brand at Enterprise Connect. And I wanted the biggest, baddest, coolest booth you'd ever seen. I want it covered. We rented these giant curtains, right? Think about just a 20 by 20 booth, 2 stories. We had a ticker symbol that was counting down for the countdown. We had scissors to cut the ribbon, champagne. We were called the Enterprise Connect darling of the show.
Wow.
And that's because it was helping people get excited, and everybody had the shirt on. Everybody had the hats, the jackets, the whatever. And we plastered the heck out of the show. Yeah. And it was one of those moments of, we did it. And I was sick as a dog. I was in the urgent care. We're like, I got to get back. I got to get back. I got to be there for the ribbon cutting, because it was like birthing a child, like we said.
Yeah. Well, and so this brings me to another thing that you taught me is like that true enthusiasm. Like, everything that we were doing, you had such an enthusiasm for it. Like, I remember we did the video and you're like, wow, this is cool. Like, very specific on your feedback. But then when we're done, you're just playing that damn thing over and over for anybody who would watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, come here. It's like, anybody who will humor me and watch my son in his solo, his guitar solo, that was the same thing. Like, look at this. Look at this sizzle reel. Let's play it in the lobby. Because I think people, especially if you come from a environment that didn't have a real strong brand, we're now teaching people what it means to just permeate whatever you do, right? Remember, we even went down as far as changing our company values to make sure that they were aligned with the brand story that we were telling. And that is when it really starts to kind of fire on all cylinders, is when you start to see that, okay, it's working. It's working.
Yeah. One of my best, and you guys made a huge investment in the sign, updating the sign after I had moved on to my next thing. And I remember the sign went up, and then I had my current client who's like in a similar area of the city. They knew I used to work there, and they're like, "Oh, did you see their cool new?" I'm like, "Yeah, my team did that. That was my team.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That was us." And
Yeah.
it was like so proud. And I think that enthusiasm, it starts at the top, you know?
Yeah, and I made everybody figure out a way to cover a suspended sign on a wall, and we had a countdown, and we had champagne, and the logo wasn't new. It just was new to the wall. But it was that moment of getting people into the office, and we had a party around a logo. But again, what I was explaining to everybody was, but it's not just about the logo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's about what it means, and it's about committing to it and believing in it. And there were even a couple of people like, oh my God, I think they might be a little teary-eyed right now. When I mean, I've told you before, right? I have a goosebump Richter scale.
Yep.
So that if I watch those cool videos and I get goosebumps, like approved. If I sit there and like, I'm feeling a little bit non-goosebumpy, then something emotional is missing that we have to figure out how we can put that in.
Yeah. And I think like leading with your heart and your emotions, like you have the combination of relying on experience. Like I've tried everything once, Yep. Whether I liked it or not, I tried it once. So I kind of know what goes into these things. And then you really allow your emotions and your empathy and your heart to creep its way into your work unabashedly.
Yeah.
Right. And like the combination of those two things is formidable. Like you can't beat it,
Well, and I think, as marketers, we need to be storytellers. And have you ever sat through a story that you want to just sleep all the way through, right? Yeah, we all have, right? When I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so uninspired. Sometimes my husband, he's a huge Audible book listener, and he'll put it on like, this is the best book. And I'm ready for bed within 90 seconds because the person narrating sounds like they're, just distressed. They don't sound excited about this. They're so just, page 3. You can't do that. And I think as marketers, we do have to be the champion, the cheerleader, whatever name you want to put to it, of be excited, and then it gets contagious. I gave a keynote speech at our latest sales kickoff, and afterwards people were coming up going, oh my God, how am I so excited now about vertical campaigns? What just happened? Like, well, good. Because we told it in a way, in a story that should actually matter, right?
Yeah.
That should actually get you excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we are coming to the top of the hour, but I want to squeeze 2 more questions in here if I can.
Okay.
So the first one would be, do you have anything else to share about, like we've talked about creating the enthusiasm, kind of like building those peer-to-peer relationships, but for the other leaders, I have a ton of CEOs and CMOs alike that listen to this podcast. What advice do you give about creating that healthy work environment where people want to thrive and be productive and, create their best work?
I think you have to recognize the work that's being done. I mean, it goes back to being proud of it, finding moments to get on that main stage, get at those all hands, PR your team's PR, right? And really getting people to see that my work matters. My work is what's making this a thing, right? I try to call people by, out by name to give kudos. I try to get as many of my team members to come in and present at the EC staff. I don't need to do it. You come in, you talk about it, right? I didn't present your team's work. I brought you with me to do that. And I think that's what gets people excited, because at the end of the day, they just want to know that their work matters. We spend a lot of time doing work. I spend way more time doing work than I do spending time with my husband or my son, right? So
Yeah.
let's find those moments to really elevate the work and the people so they can be excited with us.
Yeah.
And give credit where credit's due. And I've seen that it's such a downfall for so many leaders in my past experience of they just don't understand that if your team looks good, you look good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it really is. It's when somebody tells you, oh, your child is so well behaved. Well, that's a direct reflection of you as a parent, right?
Right.
Because if they were a nightmare, people go, what the hell is the household like over at their place, right? So I do think that that's so important is don't be afraid to really just tout the work. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't be intimidated by people who come to you and say, I want to be a CMO. Awesome. Great. Let me help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And one thing that I'll add to that, just because I have personal experience with it, is you just care about the people, regardless of whether they are, still working for you or not. Like when it was time for me to move on, just because that role didn't exist within Telesign and it was time for me to grow, you were like my number one cheerleader, like at that time and since then.
Right.
And I think
right.
that that's kind of, and every single person who's asked me about Telesite, I'm like, that is the healthiest big tech culture I've ever worked in.
Well, and I think it's I like to watch people and look at where they go and have that moment of maybe I had like a little piece of that, right? That I get to kind of share in the excitement. I was a mentor for my college sorority after I graduated college. I was the adult responsible for them for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of college women that I mentored over that 10-year period, right?
Yeah.
And I still watch, I mean, now they're, moms, and my goodness, some of them are even grandmas. And I look and go, I feel like I had a moment with them, that I can pinpoint where maybe I actually helped them. And you should get pride out of that and just watching everybody thrive that you had even just shared a moment with.
Yeah. 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 The ripple effect. Put good out
Yep.
there, you'll get good back.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
So good. Last question. I take a page from Ezra Klein's book. Are there 3, books or movies, podcasts, anything out there that you'd recommend to the audience? It could be on any subject at all.
On any subject. Okay, well, good, because I have to admit, and sometimes I get afraid to admit it, I'm actually not a big reader. When I do have quiet time, it's reading is not the thing that I will often choose to do. But there is a book, especially from a marketing perspective. I think you and I had talked about this in the past, Made to Stick, from Chip and Dan Heath, they're brothers. It's all about storytelling. Some of the best examples and the worst of when storytelling has done amazing things for brands. So I highly recommend that. It's all just stories, which is why I like it, because I don't really like to read books that are tutorials, if you will. I feel like I'm back in school. From a podcast standpoint, the Uberman Lab, I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I'm obsessed.
Obsessed. Well, and so look, I have insomnia. I have a rare form of vertigo. I have a high, pressure job. I love how he actually takes things in the science world and kind of makes them so you can consume them and can relate to them. So I love it. I actually got turned on by it just by seeing little snippets on, I think it was on Facebook, right? Of just probably the algorithm knows that I look for stuff of how do I sleep? And so I'm hooked on that one big time. And then Clickbait on Netflix. It's a little bit older. It was a limited series, and I think it is so fascinating, especially because I come from the fraud protection world.
Yep.
It's, all about how people can be so incredibly duped, how your persona and your life could be hacked. And so there's just an interesting warning sign in there, but the acting and writing is it's just phenomenal. And I don't know, I think it's like 6 or 7 episodes. And I love a good twist of an ending. I won't give it away, but that's what I love. A good M. Night Shyamalan. I don't never say his name right, but I love those movies too, where at the end I go, oh no, you didn't.
Amazing. All right. Well, Kristi, thank you so much. This has been just incredible. I think CMOs and CEOs alike and C-suiters across the board will be able to get so much from this. And yeah, just thank you from our audience and from me.
Well, thank you for having me. And as I've already said, I do love watching your journey as well. As I feel so honored that we had a time where we overlapped and got to work together. But this is pretty exciting to get to work together again, just in a different capacity.
Oh, the honor's all mine. All right. Chat soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've just listened to an episode of Giant Leaps for Brandkind. This is the podcast where I talk to business and thought leaders around the globe about growing businesses through the power of brand. If you want to support this effort, giving me a rating or review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Audible helps so much. And of course, if you're interested in marketing or brand support, you can find my contact information at nattinatlennox.com. That's NATINATLENNOX.com. Cheers.